Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I'm your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is the Philosophical Equations of Economics. And these books are available free for viewing at thephilosophicalangle.com. If you'd like to contact us and make comment and inquiry or make suggestions, and feel free to give us an email at contact@thephilosophicalangle.com. Along with me is my colleague and host and friend, and Rick Samuelson. And Rick graduated from Yale and Wharton, is an independent venture capitalist out on the West Coast. Good to see you, Rick.
And you.
The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts being used in current media, and secondarily to use those definitions to understand the righteousness and ethical superiority of the conservative viewpoint. And this week we're going to talk about why the left cannot answer a question directly. And I like to watch shows as much as anybody else, and particularly I enjoy Tucker Carlson on Fox News, as he's very bright and incisive, and I like Hannity too. And I've noticed one particular point when they interview a Democratic liberal on their show. I've noticed that the libs, the people answering the question, that they actually can't answer a question directly when posed to them by Tucker or Hannity. And you got to ask yourself, why is this? They never can answer a question directly. It's amazing. And how can they avoid it? Well, luckily, you have the philosophical angle here to answer this question, and so we're going to explain this. And so liberals, like any other person, will answer your question as long as it isn't a positive knowledge, rules-based question. And these questions of the positive rules type cannot be answered by a leftist. And I can see everybody's kind of going like, well, Suffren Succotash, what is he talking about, positive rules and all that sort of stuff? Well, a progressive liberal doesn't like questions that note the right of citizens. They prefer questions that consist of anti-knowledge. And to explain that, the nature of liberalism is that the progressive Democrat thinks that the nature of others is bad. They believe that the human condition is a sorrowful one, that people are inherently bad, and if you're not of the liberal beliefs, then you are even evil and hateful. And the only people that are good are those that are like themselves, progressive liberals, and that hold for all people. They believe that all people should be equal in every respect. Liberalism has a tenet that all should be created equal, and in order for society to be so, liberals want to depend on the coercion powers of government to enforce their dictums. With the power of government, it can shape society into one of total egalitarianism. With this, the end result is a society such as envisioned by all the famous liberal egalitarian communists, such as Marx and Engels and Lenin and Stalin and Pol Pot and so government coercion is necessary. It's a necessary ingredient to formulate, to ensure their ideology, or should I say theology. Along with government coercion comes the rules, the regulations, the dictums, the strictures, and the other forms of rules-based directives that tell the individual what not to do in society. These rules are used to whittle down the freedom of an individual so that he is restricted to the point that he is equal with all others in all respects within society. the nature of all these rules and directives and so on and so forth is as if they are actually anti-knowledge. And what I mean by that is that regulations fight against positive knowledge that runs the transactions that make an economy. Knowledge consists of information which is the first ingredient of the stimuli that come from within the body and also from without the body that come to one's consciousness. And secondly, the incoming stimuli, which is information coming to the consciousness, will take on a priority, which allows us to order our lives, and which are bits of knowledge actually. And these priorities indicate to us whether and to what extent the information is important to us. Even when something like 2 and 2 equals 4, it's a piece of knowledge. But we remember it because we remember that knowledge because we transfer it from information to knowledge, because we know that knowing this little bit of arithmetic is important to our life and that it'll help us in the future. So when information comes into our consciousness from without, the free will determines how important that information is to us and attaches an importance that prioritizes that importance. And when this degree of importance is attached to the incoming stimuli, it becomes knowledge. And this knowledge is used to order our lives to be able to do things that we want to do on a daily basis or in the future, and we want to do things that are good for us, and therefore we use knowledge to make our lives better. We use this knowledge to help us create objectives and effectuate those objectives to attain goodness for ourselves and for our families and for others in our society. The directives and regulations and laws of government come along and act as a deterrence to the effectuation of our priorities at times, and which we do when we are free to obtain goodness for ourselves and our families. But sometimes this can lead into the contradiction to these laws and rules, and the government rules override our effectuations, and thus it squashes our attempts to live our lives sometimes. And the makeup of our effectuation to attain goodness is our knowledge, our time, our effort, in an atmosphere of risk and opportunity to attain this goodness, to attain a reward for our actions, for our sacrifices. And so we do everything we do. We sacrifice everything in order to achieve a reward which has goodness. But the rules and strictures of government, they sometimes come along at times and contradict the knowledge portion of our sacrifice, and thus it limits us sometimes. Therefore, we can denominate that there are rules of government that are by their nature anti-knowledge. But luckily in our society, here in the United States, there's a document which prohibits the overextenuation of the laws and rules of government, and it's called the U.S. Constitution, along with the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is a set of positive rules that puts a limit on the government and puts a limit on the severity of the laws and regulations that a government can produce. And so we could call this Bill of Rights an anti-knowledge document, and of course a double negative is a positive. So the Bill of Rights really is positive knowledge. So when the liberal takes a look at a problem with society and he sees a solution through government coercion, but sometimes this coercion runs up against the positive knowledge of the Bill of Rights or other laws that are passed against government powers that run up directly against the negative regulations that government and its bureaucracy are wont to produce, then the liberal will not answer that question. In fact, not only is this germane to political conversations and political documents, but also to other situations, especially in philosophy. In philosophy, where sometimes when we can give a concept a specific definition, such as to something like ethics or something, they'll not answer these questions if we pose them to the liberal. And so why is that? Why would they care if a question involves negative knowledge of laws and regs or the documents about positive knowledge? The nature of the answer lies in the connection between the left believing that those that are not of the progressive left by their nature are bad people, and in the belief that society is best if it is egalitarian, and they believe it is egalitarian for the following reason, should be egalitarian for the following reason. It starts with an assumption that people's essence is bad. Again, we get back to that, their belief that the people's essence is bad and people are by their nature not good. This, of course, refers to people who are not of the progressive left, such as probably most of the people listening here are conservatives and independents. And if the people are naturally bad, they, the leftists, need the power of government to come in and keep order with these people that are not so good. If people are inherently bad, then the government is needed to bring in the rules and regulations and all sorts of anti-knowledge rules that can govern these bad people. Thus, the left has a tendency for bigger government to control society and to make more rules and laws and regulations to govern all the badness of these people, and that typically produce goods and services in society. And if and sometimes they get ahead, and when they get ahead, that's they're obviously bad, and so they need these rules to control these people who get ahead. And if people are not of the progressive left, are bad by their nature, then obviously that something is not equal. It means that what they've gotten is ill-gotten. And the natural assumption is that if they have more than somebody else in society, such as their neighbor, and since they are bad, they most likely got it through illegal, coercive, immoral, or surreptitious means. And so their wrongdoing provides the head start of the non-progressive Democrats. So they get ahead in society because they've done something wrong. And so the Republican has a head start, and their succeeding generations therefore have established a privilege. In other words, the progeny or the second generation has a head start, and that provides them their privileged lifestyle, which they're always talking about, white privilege and the sort. The left believes that this bad nature of the non-leftist plus privilege produces a society which would be a caste society, which is an upper class, which results where the wealthy upper class keep the peasants, the proletariat, the servants, and the lower class in their place. The liberal mind thinks that the conservative will try to keep their wealth and not let anybody else come to the top, so the rich will get richer and the poor will always get poorer and be there to serve the upper class. And of course, this is the thinking of those who represent the ultimate left progressive thinking of societies that were written about by Marx and Engels and effectuated by somebody like Lenin and Stalin and Mao and so forth. But of course, that is not the case. Even the wealthy always want more goodness to come into their lives, which is the first rule of economics. You always want more good. They are always open to seeing more goodness come into their lives, never ending. So if a poor man comes up with an idea to bring goodness into a wealthy man's life, into a wealthy man's society, he will embrace it and purchase it from him and help the poor man become wealthy. but we're digressing a little bit here. To sum up, the left feels that the nature of all those who are not of the progressive utopian socialist Democrats have a nature that is bad, and society needs the essence of the rules and regulations that govern those people, which are of the anti-knowledge type, but they are not so familiar, and they are not so much in agreement with those rules and regulations and laws that put a limit on the anti-knowledge, such as the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence. And they're not in agreement with such positive rules-based standards because they limit the amount of anti-knowledge that can be produced to govern those that need to be governed. Therefore, they can only speak about how bad people are and about the negative knowledge that is needed. They cannot speak of virtue and justice and ethics and other concepts that are defined by positive knowledge, and so they won't answer any of those questions involving those concepts either. And what do you think, Rick, about all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot of strategy going on here, and it's been in place for years. It's evolved amongst progressives. The Constitution itself is an enormous obstacle, and they've tried, with the Warren Court and other courts to undermine the Constitution, and have succeeded at times. But the reality is, it's a document written by geniuses, and as the old saying goes, we have a government run by idiots. The fact that it's so brilliantly assembled and designed, it is an enormous obstacle, and it's forced progressives to attack the problem of pushing a socialist agenda with different tools than would otherwise be the case if we didn't have a constitution. It'd be much easier to roll over existing legislation without the Constitution, without the Supreme Court, without that hierarchy of judgment that enables the Supreme Court to actually overrule all of the courts in accordance with a closer reading of the Constitution. And some of these tactics they resort to have been enormously successful. If you look at the content, the actual content of college curricula today versus 25 years ago, how much, identity politics has been introduced, how much the traditional subjects, which curiously enough are the product of a lot of white men in many cases, not all strictly, have been either diluted or eliminated. This whole drive toward, and I see it my own daughter's education, toward making college all about electives, right? So, kids are naturally attracted to taking the easiest courses possible, whether it's on transgenderism or cinema-related courses or other subjects that aren't fundamental to the Western tradition as it's been practiced for literally hundreds of years. And so, and again, you see it in also the types of legislation they're pushing. You see it in the types of issues they protest about. This is all about molding the narrative. And instead of having fact-based debates, which they abhor, and which they're trying to drive out of the universities, they prefer to mold narratives that can't be challenged. And that's why freedom of speech, again, hearkening back to the Constitution, is such a problem. Right? If you have freedom of speech, inevitably there's debate. And debate does not support the narrative. And the narrative is we're trying to impose a set of outcomes, okay, irrespective of the process by which we get there. So a clear example of this is the New York school system, right? The mayor currently is trying to eliminate the testing requirements for the elite New York schools, like Stuyvesant, which for years have sent smart kids, a lot of smart Jewish kids, for example, in years gone by, to the elite universities, and been very successful at it. And they happen to have an entrance test, and it's hard. Well, it turns out that, you know, now these elite schools are 50% or more Asian. They're a bunch of whites, and then, you know, the blacks and Hispanics make up 2 or 3 or 4% of the school population. Well, this isn't the right outcome. It doesn't fit the narrative. And so we have to eliminate the test, find other criteria so we can alter the makeup of these classes and ensure we have, you know, a just, quote unquote, socially just outcome, what they call social equity at the universities, which is a phrase you'll see pop up. I read it in the, you know, Board of Trustees minutes and other pronouncements from Yale, for example. And that is why the conversations they're willing to have are very stilted, not born of a genuine desire to explore the facts and let the results of that exploration speak for themselves, not a desire to employ critical thinking of an issue, whether it's abortion or immigration or what have you, but rather accuse the other side of some sort of heinous crime. And of course, the ultimate crime is racism today. Excuse me. And that's why the willingness to debate or even entertain other notions is declining, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So you're saying at the universities they've switched out critical thinking for social equity.
Yes.
And it shows in the courses too. Selection of courses.
Yeah, I see it at, you know, in the course offerings. My daughter sees it at Whitman College. It's, I mean, you know, in 25 years ago, there were much stricter requirements in terms of what a freshman or sophomore would have to take. You know, a bit of math, bit of English literature, a bit of science, you know, a cross section of knowledge, and then you would specialize. And I'm not telling you anything I don't know in your junior and senior years. Well, today, it's mostly just electives, and with the result that students are denied the opportunity to be guided in a way that would give them a more thorough, fundamental understanding of basic subjects, and then allow them to choose.
Is that a problem at Yale too?
Yes, with many schools.
Oh wow. Okay, Rick. Thanks for this insight, and we'll thank everybody for looking at the Philosophical Angle program, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.